My mom can make you beautiful. Those were the words that hung in the cold, sterile hallway of St. Marlowe Academy on a winter evening in December. Spoken softly by a 12-year-old girl named Marianne Jones to a 15-year-old girl named Isabella Alden, who sat crumpled against a locker with mascara-streaked cheeks and trembling hands. It was the kind of moment that seems small when it happens, unremarkable even, but carries within it the seeds of something that would grow into a story about kindness so profound it would shake the foundations of everything both girls thought they knew about worth, beauty, and what it means to truly see another human being. Isabella Alden was the daughter of Richard Alden, a 48-year-old billionaire whose face graced the covers of Forbes and Time, whose tech empire had reshaped how the world communicated, whose net worth was discussed in boardrooms and at dinner tables across continents. She lived in a mansion with 23 rooms, had a trust fund that could feed a small country, and attended the most elite private school money could buy. And yet, on that December evening, she sat on the cold tile floor of an empty hallway, sobbing so hard her whole body shook, feeling more alone than any human being should ever feel. Because here's the truth that nobody tells you about wealth. It can buy you everything except the one thing that matters most. It cannot buy you belonging. It cannot buy you the feeling of being seen, truly seen, by another person who looks at you and decides you matter. Before I tell you what happened next, do me one small favor. If you still believe kindness can change the world, don't just scroll by. Hit subscribe. It might not change the world, but it helps stories like this reach someone who's forgotten what compassion feels like. Isabella had lost her mother when she was 7 years old. Cancer, quick and merciless, had taken the one person who had ever looked at her with unconditional love. Her father, Richard, had thrown himself into his work, building empires, while his daughter grew up in the shadows of his success, raised by a rotating cast of nannies who were paid to care, but not required to love. At St. Marlowe Academy, surrounded by other children of privilege, Isabella had hoped to find friendship, community, maybe even a place where she belonged. Instead, she found cruelty dressed up in designer clothes and expensive smiles. They mocked her for everything. For being quiet, which they called stuck up. For being plain, which they called ugly. For not wearing makeup the right way. For not styling her hair like the other girls. For wearing the same regulation uniform skirt 3 days in a row because she genuinely didn't understand that even uniforms could be tailored and customized if you had the right connections. Money, she learned, didn't protect you from teenage cruelty. Sometimes it made you a bigger target because when you have everything and still manage to be unpopular, it proves that something must be fundamentally wrong with you. That's what the whispers said. That's what the laughter in the hallways confirmed. That's what Isabella had come to believe about herself. On that particular December evening, it had been worse than usual. 3 girls from her grade had cornered her after last period, their voices dripping with practiced malice. Did you even brush your hair today, Isabella? God, it looks like a rat's nest. Does your dad's money not buy combs? They laughed, high and sharp, the kind of laughter that cuts. And that uniform, seriously. My dog's bed looks better maintained than your clothes. I thought rich people were supposed to care about appearances. Isabella had stood there, frozen, feeling her face burn red, feeling the familiar sting of tears gathering behind her eyes. And she had done what she always did. She had run, found an empty hallway, slid down against a locker, let the tears fall where no one could see them and use them as ammunition later. Except someone did see. Marianne Jones was helping her mother clean the science wing, pushing a mop bucket that was almost as tall as she was when she heard the crying. Marianne was 12 years old, small for her age. With her hair pulled back into neat braids her mother had done that morning before they'd taken the bus together to St. Marlowe Academy. Miriam to work. Marianne to help during her winter break because they needed every extra hand and every saved dollar. The Jones family lived in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood where you heard sirens more than birdsong, where the heat only worked half the time, where dinner was often whatever they could make stretch from Sunday to Sunday. Miriam Jones worked as a janitor at the academy. arriving before dawn and leaving after dark, scrubbing toilets and mopping floors for students who never looked at her, who stepped around her like she was furniture, who lived lives so different from hers they might as well have existed on different planets. But Miriam had raised Marianne to notice things, to see people, to understand that every human being carries a story, and that kindness costs nothing but means everything. That's so when Marianne heard the crying, she didn't walk past. She set down her cleaning supplies and followed the sound to where Isabella sat. This tall, pale girl with messy brown hair and red, swollen eyes, wearing a wrinkled uniform and looking like the loneliest person Marianne had ever seen. For a moment, they just looked at each other, these two girls from completely different worlds. One black and poor, one white and wealthy, both somehow existing in the same hallway at the same moment, connected by something neither of them fully understood yet. "Are you okay?" Marianne asked, her voice gentle. Isabella wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed. "I'm fine, it's nothing." Marianne tilted her head, studying her. She had her mother's gift for seeing past words to the truth underneath. "It doesn't look like nothing." Isabella let out a shaky laugh that turned into a half sob. "They make fun of me. The other girls. They say I'm ugly, that I'm a mess. And maybe they're right. I don't know. I don't know how to. I don't know how to be the kind of beautiful they want me to be." And that's when Marianne said it. Those 6 simple words that would change everything. "My mom can make you beautiful." Isabella blinked, confused. "What?" "My mom," Marianne repeated, gesturing down the hall to where Miriam was emptying trash cans in a classroom visible through the doorway. "She's really good at hair and stuff. She makes me beautiful every morning before school. Well, I mean, I go to Washington Elementary, not here, but still, she could help you if you want." It was such an absurd offer. The janitor's daughter offering beauty advice to the billionaire's daughter. It should have been laughable. It should have been something Isabella politely declined before retreating back into her world of privilege and pain. But there was something in Marianne's eyes, something warm and genuine and completely devoid of judgment, that made Isabella nod. "Okay," she whispered. Okay, Miriam Jones was 37 years old, with hands calloused from years of hard work and a back that ached every night before bed. When her daughter brought Isabella into the janitor's break room, a tiny, cramped space with flickering fluorescent lights and a small mirror bolted to one wall, Miriam's first instinct was to say no. This was the daughter of Richard Alden, one of the richest men in the country, and Miriam was just a janitor with barely enough money to keep the lights on in her apartment. What could she possibly offer this girl that her father's money couldn't buy 1,000 times over? But then she looked at Isabella's face, really looked at it, and she saw what Marianne had seen: a child in pain, a girl who needed someone to care, to really care, not because they were paid to, but because they chose to. And Miriam had never been able to turn away from someone in need. "Sit down, sweetheart," she said softly, pulling out the only chair in the room. What happened next was something neither Isabella nor Miriam would ever forget. It was a heart-touching story that would later become a motivational story told and retold. But in that moment, it was just 2 people connecting in a small, quiet room while winter darkness pressed against the windows outside. Miriam stood behind Isabella, gently running her fingers through the girl's tangled hair, and she didn't comment on the knots or the mess. She just worked carefully, patiently, the way she did everything in life, with quiet dignity and care. "Beauty isn't about having the right things," Miriam said as she worked, her voice low and soothing. "It's not about expensive products or salon treatments. It's about knowing your worth. About carrying yourself like you matter, because you do matter, baby. Every single person matters." Isabella closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she felt something she'd almost forgotten existed: the gentle touch of someone who cared. Not because they had to, not because they were paid to, but because they had chosen to see her pain and respond with compassion. Miriam braided Isabella's hair with practiced hands, weaving the strands together with the same care she used to braid Marianne's hair every morning. And as she worked, she talked. She talked about her own life, about raising Marianne alone, about the struggles they faced, about the choice to find joy even when things were hard. She talked about her grandmother, who had taught her to braid, who had told her that you touch a person's head, you touch their soul, so you better do it with love. Guys, this was an inspirational story unfolding in real time, though none of them knew it yet. This was the kind of emotional life story that reminds us that the most powerful transformations often happen in the smallest, quietest moments, when one human being decides to reach out to another with genuine kindness. When Miriam finally finished, she stepped back and let Isabella look in the mirror. The transformation wasn't dramatic in the way movies show transformations. Isabella's hair was simply braided neatly, pulled back from her face in a style that was elegant and simple. But something in Isabella's expression had changed. She looked at herself differently. She stood a little straighter. She smiled, small and uncertain but real. "Thank you," she whispered. And the words carried the weight of everything she couldn't say. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for caring. Thank you for treating me like I matter. You come back tomorrow if you want," Miriam said. "Anytime you need help, you come find us." Isabella came back the next day. And the day after that. And the day after that. It became a ritual, this unlikely friendship between a janitor, her daughter, and a billionaire's child. Every evening, when the halls emptied and the other students went home to their large houses and their busy lives, Isabella would find her way to wherever Miriam and Marianne were working. Sometimes Miriam would style her hair again, teaching her techniques she could do herself. Sometimes they would just talk, sharing stories about their vastly different lives, finding common ground in unexpected places. Marianne, despite being 3 years younger, became like a little sister to Isabella, teaching her games they played on the bus, telling her jokes, showing her that friendship could be simple and uncomplicated and free of the social politics that dominated St. Marlowe's hallways. Over the weeks that followed, something remarkable happened. Isabella began to change, not just in appearance, though that changed too. She learned to care for herself, to braid her own hair, to iron her uniform, to walk with the quiet confidence that Miriam radiated despite having so little in material terms. But the deeper change was internal. She began to understand what Miriam had been teaching her all along, that beauty, real beauty, starts from knowing you have value. That kindness can change the world, one small interaction at a time. That the people society tells you to overlook, the janitors, the service workers. The ones in the background often have more wisdom and grace than those standing in the spotlight. The bullying didn't stop immediately. Girls like the ones who had tormented Isabella don't change overnight. But Isabella's response to it changed. When they made comments, she didn't crumble. She didn't run to empty hallways to cry alone. She held her head high, remembering Miriam's words. "Let them talk, baby." People who feel good about themselves don't need to tear others down. Their cruelty tells you everything about them and nothing about you. The other students noticed the change. They saw Isabella walking differently, carrying herself with a quiet dignity that hadn't been there before. Some still whispered, still judged, but others began to look at her with something like curiosity, even respect. And gradually, the whispers changed. People started asking where she got her hair done, who had taught her to braid like that, why she suddenly seemed so confident, so composed, so different from the girl who had slouched through hallways trying to be invisible. Isabella never told them about Miriam and Marianne. That friendship, that connection, felt too precious to expose to the harsh judgment of St. Marlowe's social hierarchy. It was hers, a poor, too powerful story that she carried in her heart. A reminder that the most valuable things in life have nothing to do with money, but secrets have a way of coming to light, especially in places like St. Marlowe Academy, where gossip flows like water and nothing stays hidden for long. It was January when Richard Alden finally noticed the change in his daughter. He had been so consumed with his work, with board meetings and product launches and the endless demands of running a tech empire, that he had barely seen Isabella in weeks. They lived in the same house but existed in different worlds. their interactions limited to brief exchanges over breakfast when they happened to eat at the same time. But even Richard, distracted as he was, couldn't miss the transformation. His daughter, who had always been withdrawn and quiet, who had moved through their mansion like a ghost haunting her own life, suddenly seemed present, alive. She smiled more. She spoke with confidence. She looked him in the eye when they talked. Instead of staring at her feet, "You seem different," he said one Sunday morning, his tone carefully neutral. "Good different. What's changed?" Isabella hesitated, holding her coffee mug in both hands. How could she explain? How could she tell her billionaire father that a janitor and her 12-year-old daughter had taught her more about life and worth and beauty in a few weeks than he had in 15 years? How could she make him understand that the most valuable relationship in her life right now was with people he probably didn't even know existed? Despite the fact that they worked in a building where he sat on the board of trustees. "I made some friends," she said simply. Richard smiled, relieved. He had worried about her for so long, this daughter who seemed to drift through life without connecting to anyone or anything. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. You should invite them over sometime. We could host a dinner party. Maybe they're not that kind of friends, Dad." Something in her tone made him pause. "What do you mean?" Isabella took a breath, and in that moment, she made a choice. She decided to tell him the truth. Consequences be damned. One of them is a janitor at my school. The other is her daughter. They've been helping me, teaching me things, important things that I never learned anywhere else. Richard's expression flickered with something Isabella couldn't quite read. Surprise, confusion, discomfort. "The janitor," he repeated slowly. "Her name is Miriam Jones," Isabella said, her voice steady. "And her daughter's name is Marianne. They're some of the kindest, most incredible people I've ever met. They've helped me more than you know." The conversation ended awkwardly, with Richard retreating behind his newspaper and Isabella finishing her breakfast in silence. But something had been planted in Richard's mind. A seed of awareness that would grow over the coming weeks as he began to really look at his daughter, to notice the change in her. To wonder about these people who had somehow reached her in ways he never had. February arrived with snow and cold winds that rattled the windows of St. Marlowe Academy. The school's annual winter charity gala was approaching, a massive fundraising event where the wealthy parents gathered to write large checks while congratulating themselves on their generosity. It was the social event of the season, complete with an orchestra, a seated dinner, speeches from board members and notable alumni, and a silent auction that typically raised millions for the school's scholarship fund. Isabella had attended before but had always hated it. The crowds, the noise, the feeling of being on display while simultaneously being invisible. This year felt different though. This year, she had an idea. She approached the event coordinator 3 weeks before the gala, her proposal carefully prepared. She wanted to give a speech, not about her father or his company, not about wealth or success, but about what she had learned over the past months, about kindness, about seeing people, about the transformative power of simple human compassion. The coordinator, charmed by the billionaire's daughter suddenly showing initiative, agreed immediately. Isabella didn't tell anyone what she was planning, not even Miriam and Marianne. She worked on her speech late at night, writing and rewriting, trying to find the words to express what she felt, to capture this emotional YouTube story quality of her transformation without reducing it to platitudes or sentimentality. This was her chance to do something real, something that mattered. This was her chance to never underestimate people ever again. And to make sure others didn't either. The night of the gala arrived with falling snow and the glitter of expensive cars pulling up to St. Marlowe's main entrance. Women in designer gowns and men in custom tuxedos flowed into the decorated auditorium, air kissing and networking, their wealth displayed in jewelry and watches that cost more than most people earned in a year. Richard Alden arrived with Isabella, his hand on her shoulder, pride evident in his expression. His daughter looked beautiful, poised and confident in a simple but elegant dress, her hair styled in an intricate braid that Miriam had taught her to do herself. What no one knew was that Isabella had arranged for two special guests. She had personally invited Miriam and Marianne, had sent a car to pick them up from their apartment, had even arranged for dresses to be delivered to them because she knew they wouldn't have formal wear appropriate for an event like this. Miriam had been reluctant and comfortable with the idea of attending a function where she would normally be the one cleaning up afterward. But Isabella had insisted, and something in the girl's voice had made Miriam agree. So there they sat in the back of the auditorium, Miriam in a simple but beautiful navy dress, Marianne beside her in dark green, both of them wide-eyed at the spectacle unfolding around them. The chandeliers, the flower arrangements that probably cost more than their monthly rent, the casual displays of wealth that surrounded them on every side, it was overwhelming and surreal. Marianne squeezed her mother's hand, and Miriam squeezed back, both of them feeling out of place but also curious about why Isabella had wanted them here so badly. The dinner was served, speeches were made, checks were written. And then Isabella was called to the stage. She walked to the microphone with steady steps, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. She looked out at the sea of faces, wealthy parents, board members, teachers, students. Somewhere in the audience was her father, watching with curiosity and pride. And in the back, nearly invisible among all the glamour, sat Miriam and Marianne. "Good evening," Isabella began, her voice clear and strong. "My name is Isabella Alden, and I'm a sophomore here at St. Marlowe Academy. Most of you know my father, Richard Alden, who sits on the board of trustees. Many of you know that I come from a background of significant privilege. What you might not know is that a few months ago, I was one of the loneliest, most miserable people in this school." A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. This wasn't the typical gala speech about gratitude and excellence. Isabella continued, her words flowing with the same emotional power she had worked so hard to capture. "I was bullied. I was mocked for my appearance, my social awkwardness, my inability to fit in despite having every material advantage. I had money, but I had no confidence. I had resources, but I had no sense of self-worth. I had everything, and I had nothing." She paused, letting that sink in. "And then something happened that changed my life. Something that taught me the most important lesson I've ever learned." She gestured toward the back of the auditorium. "Could Miriam Jones and her daughter Marianne please stand up?" Confusion rippled through the crowd as people turned to look. Miriam and Marianne stood slowly, uncertainty written across their faces. Suddenly visible in a room where people like them were usually designed to blend into the background. "This woman," Isabella said, her voice thick with emotion, "who many of you have probably never noticed even though she's worked at this school for years. Who cleans your floors and empties your trash cans and makes sure this building is pristine every single day. This woman is the one who taught me what beauty really means." Her daughter, Marianne, who is 12 years old and helps her mother work because their family needs every bit of help they can get. She's the one who first showed me genuine kindness when I needed it most. The auditorium had gone completely silent. People were staring, some confused, some beginning to understand, some visibly uncomfortable with the direction this speech was taking. A few months ago, I was sitting in an empty hallway crying because I had been bullied, and Marianne found me. She didn't ignore me. She didn't judge me. She offered to help me, and she brought me to her mother. And in a janitor's break room, under flickering fluorescent lights, Miriam braided my hair and taught me that my worth has nothing to do with my father's bank account. She gave me something that all the money in the world couldn't buy. She gave me dignity. She gave me kindness. She gave me the understanding that beauty starts from within, from knowing you matter, from carrying yourself with confidence, not because of what you have but because of who you are. Isabella's voice was shaking now, tears running down her cheeks, but she didn't stop. This was a life-changing moment, and she knew it. This was her chance to honor the people who had saved her. Over these past months, Miriam and Marianne have become my family. They've taught me more about compassion, generosity, and grace than I ever learned in any classroom or boardroom. They've shown me that the people we overlook, the people we consider beneath our notice, often possess wisdom and kindness that puts us to shame. She looked directly at her father, finding his face in the crowd. We live in a world that measures worth by wealth, success by status, value by visibility. But that's wrong. This woman, who makes minimum wage cleaning up after us, is worth more than most of us will ever be. Because she understands something fundamental that we've forgotten, that every person deserves to be treated with dignity, that kindness matters more than money, that helping someone for no reason other than because they need help is the highest form of beauty there is. She turned back to address Miriam and Marianne directly. Thank you. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for helping me when you had no reason to, when you had your own struggles and challenges to face. Thank you for teaching me that this, she gestured to the opulent room around them, means nothing if we don't use it to uplift others, to see others, to treat every human being with the respect and kindness they deserve. The silence that followed her speech was profound. Then, slowly, someone began to clap. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet, applauding, not with the polite, obligatory clapping typical of these events, but with genuine emotion, genuine respect. Some people were crying. Some were looking at Miriam and Marianne with new eyes, perhaps for the first time really seeing them as people, as individuals with value and dignity and worth. Richard Alden stood among them, tears streaming down his face, and for the first time in years, he felt something crack open inside his chest, the realization of how badly he had failed his daughter, and how two people he had never even known existed had succeeded where he had failed. He had built an empire but neglected to build a relationship with his own child. He had accumulated billions but missed the fact that his daughter was suffering, alone, desperate for connection. And it had taken a janitor and her 12-year-old daughter to do what he should have done all along, to truly see Isabella and help her find her worth. What happened next became the stuff of legend at St. Marlowe Academy. A black girl inspirational story and a poor janitor hero story that would be told and retold for years to come. Richard Alden, in front of everyone, walked to the back of the auditorium. He approached Miriam and Marianne, and with genuine humility, he shook their hands and thanked them. Then he made an announcement that shocked everyone present. He would personally fund Marianne's education all the way through college, whatever school she wanted to attend. He would create a scholarship in Miriam's name, a full-ride scholarship for students from low-income backgrounds to attend St. Marlowe Academy, because someone who possessed the wisdom and kindness that Miriam had shown deserved to be honored, not overlooked. And he would ensure that every janitor, every service worker, every person who kept the academy running received a significant raise, because it was long past time that the people who did the real work of making the school function were compensated fairly for their labor and treated with the dignity they deserved. The transformation wasn't just Isabella's anymore. It was everyone's. The gala raised more money than any previous year, but more importantly, it raised awareness, a collective understanding that worth isn't measured in dollars, that the most profound acts of kindness often come from the most unexpected sources, that we should never underestimate people based on their job title or economic status. In the weeks and months that followed, things changed at St. Marlowe Academy. Students started actually acknowledging the janitors, the cafeteria workers, the maintenance staff. People said hello, learned names, treated service workers like human beings rather than invisible background characters in the drama of their privileged lives. It wasn't perfect. Old habits and ingrained classism don't disappear overnight, but it was a start. It was proof that one emotional life story, one moment of genuine connection, one person deciding to speak truth about kindness and worth could create ripples that spread far beyond the initial moment. Isabella continued her friendship with Miriam and Marianne, but now it was acknowledged, celebrated even. She spent weekends at their small apartment, learning to cook with limited ingredients, playing board games on their worn couch, experiencing a kind of warmth and genuine love that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with connection. Marianne became like the little sister Isabella never had. And Miriam became the maternal figure she had lost when her own mother died. Richard Alden, humbled and changed by what he had witnessed, began to rebuild his relationship with his daughter. He cut back on work travel, made time for family dinners, actually listened when Isabella talked. He also developed a friendship with Miriam, seeking her advice on parenting, on life, on the things that mattered beyond quarterly earnings and stock prices. She became an unlikely advisor to a billionaire, offering wisdom born from struggle and grace in the face of hardship.